All right, welcome to Sondervale Voices. I am lucky to have Luke Starr with me today, and a friend for almost a decade now, I think, as well. So, which is easy for me to talk to Starr. So that's nice. But a few things that we're going to be covering off today is Luke Starr as an athlete, a business owner, a coach, a new father. He's had a massive last 12 months. But sorry, firstly, welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
I think maybe we start, which is probably my favourite subject when it comes to Luke Starr, is Luke Starr the athlete. So can you?
I saw you had that there at the top of your list. It always makes me smirk a little bit.
Can you give me a rundown of your athletic career?
I'm glad you asked. Played a lot of rugby. That was probably my main sport throughout being a kid and into my mid-20s. Played it for like 15 years and managed to play a little bit at a shoot shield level in Sydney, which is sort of like the first grade competition, for a couple of different clubs and a little bit overseas. In America, I played for a college team and just socially, and then in the UK, I had a season sort of semi-professionally over there for a little bit. And but then about the time that I wrapped up rugby, I was also about the time I started working in the fitness industry and came across CrossFit.
Yeah.
And that was in about 2007. So
Before we move on from rugby, what position did you play?
I grew up playing in the centres and loved playing centre. But then as I got into adult rugby and even Colts, and I just wasn't big enough anymore.
And everyone else started to grow?
Yeah, that's right. So, and then I had to transition to halfback. I was never an amazing halfback because my left-hand pass was never that great. I guess it hadn't developed enough by that point. So I actually played my first season of men's was out at Penrith. And so Penrith were bottom of the table, so we actually ended up defending a lot, so we don't have the ball very much, which actually suited me really well as a halfback that couldn't pass very well, but could tackle okay. So,
without even knowing that, I would have just assumed you were incredible in defence. Yeah. Were you renowned as being a good defender?
It's all I had. Yeah, defence was okay. Yeah,
I think that suits you to a T, being incredible in defence. That doesn't surprise me one bit. All right, so rugby career sort of stopped once 2007. How old were you? How old were you when you played your last season? 24. Okay.
Yeah, I always meant to go back, but I got busy working as a personal trainer. I needed my evenings. Started finding out all about what CrossFit was and getting curious about that. And realised that they were clashing. Those trying to do both intensely was difficult. So made the call to have a season off, and then never just ended up really going back. For having a full season after that, unfortunately.
Do you feel as if you didn't find CrossFit and fall in love with the competitive side of it that you would have went back? Was CrossFit the main reason? Yeah, it's a good
question. I think I definitely knew that I wanted to always just play sport and be not just be fit, but also just do something competitive. So I think I needed something like that, and CrossFit hit the mark.
I actually know a fair bit about your early CrossFit days, but I don't know about your first CrossFit week, that first class. I assume you didn't do a class.
No.
I assume you're in a gym at 2007, a Globo gym, doing some WODs. Is that how it works?
Yeah. I met a guy who at that time was just he just kind of started what was the early beginnings of what would become CrossFit Sydney, Andrew Cattermole. And he was working as a personal trainer at the gym as well.
Okay.
And he would give me these workouts that he'd find online on the main site that I hadn't seen yet. And he'd go try and see how you go with this, and he'd maybe give me a time that would be a good time, or I'd always just be hungry to come back to him and go, was that a good time? How'd that go?
What were you like straight off the bat?
I think I was all right. Yeah. I'd done some strength training background, and I lifted weights before and always been around the gym a bit. So I think
any Olympic lifting?
I'd done a little bit of hang power cleans and stuff like that, and a little bit of rugby development training, but not much.
Okay.
But a fair bit of squatting, benching.
Talk me through Luke Starr as the CrossFit athlete. 2007, you start doing workouts. What was your first comp? How did that progression look like?
I I think the first official comp was, it would have been 2009 regionals.
Mm-hmm.
Like back then it was regionals, but basically anyone could just show up. And it was at,
What, 2009? Anyone could show up?
yeah, anyone could just register for it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was at CrossFit Effects in Cogra.
Yeah.
And yeah, you signed up for it and you showed up, and there was like 10 heats, and you just got into it.
For the OG CrossFitters, what are some names there that you remember? 2009 CFX. Who was there?
Matt Swift,
Yep.
Steve Willis, Commander Steve was competing.
Matt Swift.
Matt Swift was
How
competing.
old was Swift? He would have been.
Oh, I don't know. That's like
He would have
15
been
years ago.
Yeah, he still would have been.
He still would have been older than, like, I'm 40 now.
He would have been 40 then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who else? Like,
And then what happened from CFX after that? Was
Darren
that a
Shaw was
qualifying?
there.
Yeah.
The Daz. Shout out the Daz. Rob Downton was competing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob was there 2009?
Yeah, he was competing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember looking at him going, wow, that guy's an animal.
Yeah, that's people still have the same
I
reaction.
still say that. Yeah.
What was was that a qualification process, 2009 CFX?
Yeah, top 3 or 4 went to the games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you remember who they were?
Nadine Shaw was one of them, like
Yeah.
Darren's wife. Steve Willis went. Oh, Chris Hogan,
Of
pretty
course,
sure
yeah.
went, and Doug Armstrong. Doug Armstrong, yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
That's gone a long way back now. That's a long way back.
That's way back.
So we can safely assume you didn't make it 2009 to the CrossFit Games.
No.
Do you remember where you finished?
I finished. Actually, I might mess this up. I think I came. So me and Chad was there. You know, Chad McKay, my old business partner. A lot of you CrossFit guys will know Chad. He and I finished. Either he finished 10th, I finished 11th, or I finished 10th, he finished 11th.
Okay.
It was something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Man, okay. So let's give you some highlights of your CrossFit career, because I could sit here and talk about the early days of CrossFit forever. What progressed from there? So obviously, like, how many times did you end up competing at regionals?
I think it was eight times.
8 times at regionals. How many times did you compete at the games in a team?
2 times.
2 times. And what were your finishes those 2 times?
2013 we came 12th, and 2014 we came 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was obviously for CrossFit Active, which was your first affiliate as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit how CrossFit Active came about.
CrossFit Active, we affiliated in 2009, but we actually, I think, opened the doors officially at the start of 2010, because it took us a while to get the place open. But that was in partnership with some other guys that I was working with at the gym I was working at the time, at the Cook and Phillip Park Aquatic and Fitness Centre in Sydney. So Chad was there working with me. I knew Adam Peary from working through the same organisation. He was on the other side of the city at one of the other gyms, and a guy called Ben Perrin. So the 4 of us. The goal was actually just to be able to have a space that we could go and like drop weights and make a mess with chalk and do muscle ups and, you know, not be worried about noise and all that kind of stuff and space. So, you know, it's just like a little garage roller door kind of place. And we were like, if we can just get enough members to like cover the rent, we'll be stoked, because we've got somewhere to train. Like, that was sort of the goal.
Yeah.
And then, and that was 2010, the start of 2010. And it was also right at a time where CrossFit was gaining a lot of popularity. So we kind of got it at a really good time. And I think within about 18 months of that, we were opening it was busy enough to open like a second location, a bigger location, and sort of go from there. I credit it mainly to the popularity of CrossFit going up. I mean, you know what it was like around that time.
It was booming.
Yeah.
Absolutely booming. People just running in off the street to try CrossFit.
Yeah, and it was kind of this underground thing. It was very, like, none of us were very particularly professional. We all just like training. You know what it's like.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot different now. A lot more, and there's a lot more small gyms, micro gym, functional gyms around now.
And obviously you're a very humble guy, but CrossFit Active also became probably one of the top 3 most successful competitive affiliates in Australia, if not the most, if you take into consideration your Alethea Boone, Chad McKay. Like, these guys had
we had a good
high
run.
finishes. You had multiple teams compete at regionals, multiple teams qualify to the games. Did you ever have 2 teams at the games? Because I remember you had 3 teams at regionals at one time.
Yeah, we had 3 teams at regionals, which was for us that was
That was huge.
Yeah, that
back
was a
then.
big I know we're pretty proud of that, and that was when it was teams of 6. So just to have our crew there, who trained together every day, out there, it was pretty big special.
And to remember, it was teams of 6, obviously, so more people, but also you had to train at that affiliate. And back then, it was a lot less likely that you would go and you would jump in with other affiliates. Everyone used to stick to themselves.
Yeah, they did.
So you didn't. You had a really good relationship with CrossFit Athletic, and I remember you guys were quite competitive. So there was a good relationship there. But correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember it back then. Everyone sort of just stuck to themselves.
Yeah. It was very. Yeah, it was pretty not territorial, but gyms were really pretty insular places.
Yeah,
so,
and to get 3 teams to regionals back then was huge.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Fun.
Okay, so we'll come full circle. Obviously, you're an affiliate owner now, but you ended up leaving CrossFit Active.
Yep.
And then starting a new business. So you want to talk us through that transition?
So about 2016, started really getting into really enjoying the aspect of helping people get ready specifically for competitions, and do some stuff beyond what they might just be doing in classes to just improve their training. So I started doing a little bit of it, more programming for people and coaching outside of the class format.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also kind of just done some more study at the time as well, and was keen to use that. And I was just really sort of into wanting to apply the things that I'd learned. So, at that time, I made the call to move on from CrossFit Active and just pursue that a bit more and sort of go all in on trying to help people in that strength and conditioning realm, basically, and do it wherever I could find myself, trying to be a strength and conditioning coach for people in any sport really that wanted to get strength and conditioning help to improve on. Thinking that I would find, probably end up with some rugby players and maybe some powerlifters, because by that stage I'd done a bit of powerlifting as well, and CrossFitters. I thought I'd probably try and target those 3 sports: rugby, powerlifting, and CrossFit, and that's what I'd probably work with.
Did you end up getting some rugby and powerlifters?
Yeah, I never. I sort of. My initial client base was all CrossFitters, really. Yeah. Some of them wanted to do weightlifting competitions and things like that, so we'd do specific things toward weightlifting or powerlifting. I did have a few people in CrossFit. Tends to attract people that also have more tactical athletes that want to get ready for army tests and that kind of thing, which wasn't really my area. Okay. So I didn't end up having many of those clients ongoing. But anyway, long story short, it ended up being so much within the CrossFit space that there was enough there to keep me well and truly busy, and that suited me down to a T, because I sort of love, it's my favourite sport to coach for anyway.
Yep.
So then I just decided to make that my sole thing, really, once we started that business, 2016.
When you said 2016, then I thought, to think back, it's 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I wouldn't have assumed it was 2016 that all happened. It feels like a lot closer than 2016.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It just... Yeah.
You said something before that you went back and did some study, which I don't know if a lot of people know about you. But what qualifications did you? Did you do exercise physiology?
Yeah, I'm an exercise physiologist, by trade.
Yep.
And not that I've ever done much clinical exercise physiology with, working with people with heart conditions or musculoskeletal injuries, that kind of thing, because there's the clinical side of exercise physiology. But I've always worked more in the fitness industry and sports performance and stuff like that.
In your opinion, how much does that knowledge help you as a coach?
I think it's been I do think it's been valuable. It's not the be all and end all, but it definitely helps to kind of fill some gaps and and makes things like programming a bit easier and planning, I think. I mean, it probably helps in quite a lot of areas, but just talking back to that period when I started, when I left CrossFit Active, that was around the time that I finished a Masters in Strength and Conditioning. So it was a lot of specific exercise science around getting people ready for sport and that kind of stuff.
So you did your Masters in Strength and Conditioning. Is that when you were going over to Perth?
Yeah, I went over to Perth for the practicum at the end of the degree. Yeah.
So exercise physiologist, masters in strength and conditioning.
Yep.
And then did you do, obviously you got your personal training cert?
Yeah, personal training cert, and just a lot of small. I'm a sucker for a course, like a short course.
I remember
like
you were doing
weightlifting courses, and
you were doing
lots
psychology
of that kind of
courses. I remember
psychology.
you were doing mindset work. Like ever since I've known you, you're continuously learning. Like you're always. What do you think? Where do you think that comes from? That sort of academia side.
Yeah, I think if when you start, I don't know, it's like you start learning a little bit about something, and then it's the when you can feel it, like the application of it working and really clicking.
Yeah.
Then that just spurs me on to want to learn a little bit more.
And that's something I love about you as well, is that it wasn't always just like, all right, I'm going to go do my CrossFit level 2, level 3, I'm going to do endurance. Like it was like you went across, did some psychology work, some mindset work, like it was very all encompassing. You want to know the entire athlete.
Yeah.
Not just necessarily, I see a lot of people get really focused just on the strength work, just on the endurance work, just on the ollie work.
I think I'd consider myself, definitely more of a generalist.
Yeah.
With that way of thinking. I think that's why if you think about like the sport that I'm into, with the CrossFit being you got to be kind of good at lots of different facets. And I think thinking about the way I've tried to upskill myself, like you said, it's been trying to capture try to take the most important pieces of all the different disciplines and areas, and then I see my job as trying to bring them together and get them into a useful form that's relevant for the CrossFit athlete.
Yeah.
Which is because CrossFit training is it's actually pretty complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. Like I'm still trying to figure it out myself. It's like this ongoing thing that I'm trying to crack a code for, and you get a little bit closer each year, each season. You see how your athletes have gone and their results, and you look at that and you analyze that and try and do a bit better job next year. And the tests keep changing because every year's a different event. So
I was just about to say,
it's just like an ongoing thing. You can always keep learning. I think that's what keeps me engaged in it so much, is you're learning every time.
You took the words out of my mouth. Now, getting to know you more and more about you wanting to always solve that puzzle and, understand it deeper. CrossFit's always just going to keep you coming back.
Yeah, exactly.
It's forever change. Not only the workouts are forever changing, but even the seasons are forever changing. Like the entire sport just changes every year. There's all different applications from regionals to semi-finals, back to regions. It's always changing. You'll probably never get bored of it, which is a good thing for you.
Yeah, that's it.
So when you started, obviously left CrossFit Active, started Starr Strength and Performance. Once you realized that you had enough interest in just CrossFit athletes, what was your goal? What was what did you want to do with your CrossFit athletes?
I've always been like a competitive, love competition and sports. So I'm obviously attracted to trying to get these athletes performing well and achieving well and in those competitions and qualifying for things like the CrossFit Games, ultimately, and that kind of stuff. So that was a big, it kind of was a big part of it, but whenever I talk about that, I'm also very careful to also keep in touch with, because they're the outcome goals of the competitions and the results and things like that. And as an athlete, as a young athlete and growing up, and, you see it as a coach as well, if you get too attached to the outcome goals, then it can sometimes be a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm always learning from that. That's like life lessons, but also, I've learned from studying about that stuff as well. Having outcome goals like that for Starr Strength, but also having the process goals and the enjoyment of it. If those competitions didn't exist, or if you had a bad outcome in those competitions, what else have you got to draw joy from in your practice? So when I decided on what I wanted to do with Starr Strength, it still had to be. It was never meant to be purely for, I only work with elite athletes or something like that.
Yeah.
You get to, if you do a good job of working with people and getting them good results and enjoy that process and learn and continue to get better, you'll eventually probably be working with some elite athletes, and that'll be an outcome that is appealing. Yeah. But it's, it wasn't the only metric for how we wanted to, where I wanted to go with it, if that makes sense. Because it can't be, because you can't, if you rely everything on that, your whole... that's just not how I tick, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think I think it's more common for someone to come to you with that outcome goal and say, like, I want to make the CrossFit Games, I want to go to regionals in a team, and then it's like, all right, well, what's the progression? What's the process goals towards that? And then they're like, well,
Yep.
no, I got nothing. I just want to go to the CrossFit Games. Everything else,
Yeah.
just. So can you give me examples of how you work with people with that? Like if someone does have the outcome goal of like, I want to go to the CrossFit Games, what are some of the process goals that you've set maybe for some of your guys over the years? You don't have to give me exact examples, but just some things that maybe an athlete that only has outcome goals that they could address, some things that they could look for.
Yeah, well, we've got this thing that I called the goals matrix, and this is stuff that I'd learnt in like sports psychology and stuff like that in the modules I've studied on that. But it was drawn from that a little bit. But I would actually talk about it in those terms. I sort of break it down to the 3 types of goals. I'd sort of say we've got our outcome goal that we want to achieve, that qualifying for that thing or whatever it is. Then we've got our performance goals, which are the performance metrics, that will allow you to get to that outcome goal, which might be your back squat's got to be a certain amount, and your 1 mile run's got to be a certain amount. So breaking down the performance into more detail. So you've got your outcome, your performance goals, and then your process goals. And the process goals are the day-to-day, week-to-week, session-by-session things that you're working towards the performance goals. But in that goal, in that process of like defining those terms for the athlete, break them down, starting to list them down and chunk them down into time frames and smaller milestones and things like that. Certainly do that. But I also explain to them if you want to spend, you want to have that outcome goal there, but if you're completely attached to that, then it's you're not able to. You're not able to enjoy your process as much. You're not able to feel this stuff well, obviously as well. But there's the small wins that you have along the way, or if you don't get the outcome goal of the competition result you wanted, it's like you're blinded to the improvement that you had. You're not able to recognize and appreciate the improvements that you've had along the way, and you actually are a better athlete as a result. And just constantly bringing the athlete's attention to those things, and not only those written down performance metrics and things like that, but also just to like reminding them that they might have through their past 3 months of training made a bunch of good friends, awesome friends. They might be, if they're reflecting on it, like thinking about how much enjoyment they've got from their training, thinking about the other things that are a bit less tangible that have developed their character outside of like the performance physical things as well. And just, I see my job sometimes as trying to remind the athlete of those things as well.
Yeah.
Because part of playing sport and doing sport is you have ups and downs and highs and lows, and that's part of the enjoyment and the thrill and the drama of like being an athlete, right? So having those things to draw upon when you're in those hard times in your sport, because they will come, like is part of it, and it's an important part of being a resilient athlete, right? And being
it's incredible. I think what you were just talking about there is something that a lot of potential coaches as well, not just in CrossFit, but in general, they just like overlook that. That is such a massive part of it. The progression that they get towards that outcome goal is far more important than the actual outcome goal. I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but they call it gold medal depression. Even if you do get the outcome that you desired, when everything was hinging on you getting that outcome, when you do get it, it's usually followed by a pretty big crash. And it's very hard to get yourself up and what's next. And you're always trying to fill that void of, I'm working towards this. 1 gold medal is not enough. I've got to go to the games twice. I came 19th. I've got to come 15th now. And maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we see this like in affiliates I see people that train all year and they might get their first bar muscle ups. They would get their power clean up to 135 pounds.
All these things.
Then they do the open and they miss out on the top 10%. And, all of that progression and that like euphoria of learning all those movements, their strength going up, their cardio going, like all of that. It's just washed away because they came 11th, like top 11%, And it's like they hinge it all just on that. So I don't think it's even just at the elite level. It's like your everyday athlete does the exact same thing. It's super powerful.
Oh, definitely. And it's also like the term locus of control, like what you can't always the outcome sometimes is dictated by the programming at the event, your competitors, whether you fall sick on that day. Like there's all sorts of variables that can affect that. positively or negatively, that you may not have control over. But your day-to-day processes are the things you have the most control over. So that's that's just worth reminding the athlete of.
Yeah, it definitely is. Is there any other sort of like frameworks that you put in around Starr strength that you've used over the years?
So one thing, just sort of thinking about when I started Starr Strength, and you asked me before, was when I first sat down to try and put together, like, what is my system going to be and how am I going to help people? I ended up putting together 8 pillars that were just kind of there as reminders to me that these areas are all important areas for developing an athlete, and lead to their success. And as a coach, I'll have a skill set that over time I want to develop and be able to help people in all those areas. I might have a strong, might be stronger and have more expertise in certain areas as a coach, but I want to be able to at least help out people out somewhat in those other areas. And then I want my system that I develop over time, because Starr Strength's evolved over time from me. Initially it was me being just a one-man show with some face-to-face coaching and some online coaching, and then it's developed over the years to bigger stuff. But whatever evolution stage we were at, I always wanted to make sure we were offering value through these 8 pillars that we have.
So the 8 pillars have been with you from day one. Can you talk us through them? Give us an idea of what they are?
Yeah, so the goals matrix is the first one that I was speaking about before.
Okay.
So having a framework of how you set your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. So the goals matrix, the second one is targeted programming. So you obviously got your training program, and it needs to be targeted to certain strengths or weaknesses and times of year and whatever you're working towards. The third one is movement coaching, so giving the athlete feedback on how they're moving and refining that technique and that kind of stuff. The fourth one is accountability. So I think a really important part of the coaching interaction is purely the athlete knowing that someone witnessed what they've done.
Dude, how powerful is that? How powerful is just that one alone?
And is keeping tabs on them and that kind of thing. But just someone knowing that you said you were going to do a thing, and that is enough to compel that athlete to make sure that they do that thing when things get hard. It's crazy how people rarely ask you for accountability, or they often don't realize that that's what they want, but that's the value that they're getting.
We could talk about this forever, but
what I'm talking about.
100%. And people the one that I hear the most is I have to have an event. I always got to be working towards something. And it's well, you don't. It's just, you've got a consequence and a deadline of that event with a date on it. And if you don't put in the work, it's going to show up on that day. It's not necessarily have to work towards something. You just need accountability. Yeah. We could talk about that forever. Go to the next one.
So that's a big one. The fifth one is learning. I think you're doing a disservice to the athlete if you're not teaching a man to fish, so to speak. They've got to be learning and understanding the purpose behind what they're doing. A, because they'll get a better result in the short term, and B, because they'll just be better athletes and know what to do in the long term. And
that one sounds sort of counterintuitive, as you want to keep them on, as an athlete for as long as possible. The less they know, the longer they need you for. But obviously,
business wise, you could argue that that's not a good strategy because they're not going to need you in the long term. Yeah. But I think, I think they actually will value and stick around for longer if they're learning.
Yeah.
And it does get to the point with a lot of athletes, especially the more experience they get, where the amount you can teach them does start to diminish.
Yeah.
And you may still be able to bring a lot of value through, you may not be teaching as many light bulb moments, but you might be getting a lot of these other pillars, for example, that I'm talking, the goals matrix, the programming, the movement coaching. There might be things there that they're still getting value from, and they want to stick around, or they might not. You might get to a point with that athlete where you've given them all you can, and it's the best move for them to find another mentor or coach.
And to your point, you on the other side of learning and keep teaching your athlete, you've got creating a dependency. You're going to make this person of it, that's very unhealthy. It's not the right place to be.
That's not what you're in the game for. Exactly. You're in the game to be a good coach, to learn, and being a coach, making someone dependent on you isn't good coaching. It's just doing that.
And also you see that, like, I'm not just talking about CrossFit, but that's in all sports as well. Some people do have that approach that I've got the secret, and you do as I say and you'll get there.
Yeah.
And it's like when they create that dependency with the athlete, the most common sport I've seen that is in gymnastics for some reason. And I know very little about gymnastics, so I don't want to go into that wormhole.
Yeah.
But I think the learning one is
it's
maybe counterintuitive, like you said, to the business model, but it makes perfect sense and it's the right thing for the athlete.
Yeah, well, that's where mine goes to with it. But it's also, I think, interesting because different sports have different styles, different coaches, different personalities have different styles as well.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I'm still learning about. I'm never 100%. You're pretty sure you're giving someone the exact, the best program you can, but it's impossible for you to know exactly every single variable in the sport. It's a new sport as well, so I think where CrossFit, the sport is in its life cycle, I don't think anyone can say this is best practice. It's been done for 50 years yet in the sport, with so much conviction. Maybe in gymnastics they can, you know what I mean? Sports have been around longer.
And I think anyone that knows and been around CrossFit for long enough is the coaches that do say that, it's a pretty clear indication that they don't actually know what they're talking about because the forever evolving sport of CrossFit, like you said, there is just not enough data there to be definitive on this is the way forward. Yeah. But I think being humble enough to like say that as well is like a really admirable trait. Yeah. The worst thing you want to hear from a coach is, I know exactly what's going to happen. It's like what no one does in this sport. Yeah. What are we up to? Sorry, that was.
We got the learning aspect. So that's number 5. Number 6 is nutrition. It probably always has been my probably weakest area as a coach out of the A. Like I've had a reasonable amount of study in that area, but I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian.
Yeah.
But it's always in the conversation with any consult we have with our athletes and a talking point and something that is very important. So it's on the 8 pillars and it's there. Number 7, mental skills, whether you call it mindset, mental skills, sports psychology, that sort of area.
It's hard to define.
Yeah, hard to define. But I settled on mental skills as the subheading, I guess, because I wanted it to be described in a way that's something that can be worked upon.
That's a great way to explain it.
I talk to the guys about you do your physical training in the gym, but you also can do your mental training, and there's evidence-based practices that you can do to, sharpen your mind, to work on your, emotional resilience, to be able to work on your poise in competition, to be able to, all sorts of ways, be mindful and that kind of thing.
I haven't heard someone word it like that, the mental skills, because it gives you the feeling that you can work on it. Because typically what you hear is you either got it or you don't. You they tap their head, like growing up playing rugby as well.
Yeah.
You either got it or you don't. And it's like, well, I don't. It's like, but when you label it like that, it does give a ability to make the athlete feel like they can progress with it, even if it's really minor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's huge. It's
do you find, sorry to cut you off, but do you find the CrossFit athletes that are coming to you, do you find that they, as a general sort of rule, they have really good mental skills or not so evolved mental skills? Because I think CrossFitters are renowned as being like really tough, but like maybe can't regulate, emotions and stuff like that. Like, where do you sit on that?
They're not afraid. They like intensity. I think people who like intensity are attracted to CrossFit. Like that satisfaction of I worked hard and I really push myself, and you get a rush of endorphins and positive hormones around your system, and that's a very positive, healthy thing, with any kind of exercise, but like particularly with CrossFit and its intensity. So I think people are. And then when an athlete starts to get some improvement and they start to connect that, okay, I train hard, I get better. I train hard, I get better. It's this feedback loop or whatever.
Yeah.
But then one of the things with some athletes who are like that intermediate level where more training must be better, like because every time I've increased my training and done more, I've gotten better and better and better. And, so I find myself having to work with athletes to get from that intermediate to that more advanced or experienced level.
Okay.
That you do get to a point where more isn't going to be better. Like, you're not going to keep getting those newbie gains, or you're not going to, you're just a different beast to what you were like a year or two or season or two ago. And we've got to train a little bit smarter and that kind of thing. That's a bit of a mindset shift for him, and the trust, and there's a bit of trust that's needed for that. And
oh man, that transition from like what got you to here is not going to get you to there. Just like grinding in the gym all day. I feel like it's one of the most fulfilling stages of watching an athlete is in that when they realize, and it's like, oh, okay, I can work on, these. I think these 8 pillars are incredibly valuable for CrossFit athletes, especially because I reckon maybe when I think of a CrossFit athlete, they're thinking of like 2, maybe 3 of these. They're thinking about their movement, they're thinking about their nutrition probably last, and their program. That's like the 3 that when you said that to me, I'm like, those 3 is like every athlete thinks of those 3. And you got 5 more that I don't think a lot of them are like really diving into. Yeah.
I mean, just before we go on to the last one, just thinking of some of the main things with my guys because we, when it comes to the mental skills stuff, we've tried to address this quite a bit in our training camps, because that's when we've got an opportunity to actually talk to people and have some experts come in and talk and put together some like little modules and things like that.
Yeah.
But some of the key things, that getting them their head around like how much training and that's okay, you've done enough, and just because you haven't completely floored yourself for day in day out doesn't mean you haven't done enough and you're not improving and you're not going to do better. That's one element of it. Another element of where I've found it beneficial is to help the people with nerves in competition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one, and being able to focus on task in competition when they're in a loud stadium and they're nervous and they're looking around and there's all these other people they know from Instagram there, and they're like it's pretty hard to perform in that situation for especially the more novice guys. That's another area where it's helped. And then another area is talking about Instagram is like the comparison to the other athletes, and these guys are doing their training in their gyms, but they're also following all the competitors online, seeing them lift certain weights or do whatever, and it can occupy a lot of their headspace and get them thinking pretty negatively about their own performance and stuff like that, and affecting their motivation. So that's another area that comes up as a bit of a difficult
it's one
obstacle for them. Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings of all time is comparison is the thief of joy. That is so true, and especially with CrossFit being such a Instagrammable sport. It suits social media.
Yeah, and it's getting a little bit more professional. It's getting some sponsors in there. So there's athletes are starting. Some of them have got bigger followings, and
there's lots of positives to posting on social media.
And they kind of might be obliged to, but it's also tying into their self-worth and their identity and stuff as well. Especially if they're younger athletes. So it is a part of being a high-level CrossFit athlete now. Is like, mainly Instagram, but all the social media platforms and how you interact with them and how they can serve you, but they can also, work against you sometimes as well, different ways.
Mate, I actually haven't heard you explain the 8 pillars like that, and I think that's...
We've got one more to go.
What was the last one? You held out on me. I thought we're on 8.
No,
I was done. I'm impressed. All right, we're getting a bonus one.
I'll give you a bonus just for tonight. No, we got the last one's team environment.
Okay.
Team environment, camaraderie. Well, that's one element of it, but I've got team environment there because environment has a huge impact. The guy who they're athletes who can get amazing results training on their own, and do that. But having some element of team environment, even if that athlete once a month goes and trains with another crew and learns some things or gets some extra intensity, or they're going to still benefit. Environments, it can help you in a lot of different ways, not just from helping with the intensity and the motivation to turn up every day, but also just watching and observing other athletes, being in a crew. That joy aspect of, the enjoying your process and that kind of thing. So I think team environment's ideal if an athlete has access to it, and not all team environments are the same. You want, specific things you might want. If you're a really high level CrossFitter, there's only certain people that can actually trainers like can do what you can do. So it's probably hard to find training buddies and that kind of thing. But most people who do what I do, like these coaches who work with these athletes, have like camps and get-togethers where they get ready for comps together and that kind of thing.
The environment, like you grow to your environment. That's exactly what it is. And it's funny because I think in years past in CrossFit, it was more evident than now because of what we're talking about before, that territorial thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw these really good athletes in an environment, maybe their affiliate, that didn't quite suit their training style, you didn't have the people around them to push them. Whereas then you had another affiliate like CrossFit Active at the time back then, and now Starr Strength, where people are drawn to that environment because they see the benefit of being around those people.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
It's so important.
It can have a huge impact. And so just tying it back to like why it's part of 8 pillars, like Starr Strength's been largely an online thing for most of these 8 years, but there's elements of this in-person things that we try and always, offer. So whether that's the camps or whether it's, we do these big weekend training camps, or we do these periods of training where we'll invite people to come in and train together to get ready for particular competitions and stuff like that. But even with the online aspect, the community of athletes that we have online, we do our best to have them interacting and to be benchmarking against, one another on the app with the results they're getting in their training. So
valuable. That's so valuable.
Yeah. So I think what we've created is a system that has a high degree of like one-on-one sort of coaching, but it's also got that group environment kind of feel where you're part of a community, you're learning and benchmarking with other people and stuff. And I think it's, I always just think about try to create something that I would want to do and get results for myself. And I'd feel a bit lonely on my own program with just one coach.
Yeah.
But I do still want that personalized approach to work on the things I want to work on. But then you've got this enjoyable aspect of like, trying to, you got that guy you want to try and beat his score on the day or whatever it is, like.
Which is why we all started, like that's one of the best parts of it.
Yeah.
And now I've heard all 8.
That's it.
I missed the environment one, but I think it's probably one of the top 3 most important. That environment is incredible. I'd love to go through that with you in more depth and put that on a hierarchy and get you. But we won't do that on this episode. But maybe we can talk about what this is, I suppose, equated to now. So do you want to talk us through what the competition season looks like at the moment for Starr Strength? So obviously we're through the open quarters.
Yeah.
We're about to come up to semis. Who are your athletes that you've got and teams and stuff like that? Like where is Starr Strength up to?
Yeah, so we're this weekend.
Season?
We head up to Brisbane for the Torian Pro, which is the Oceania Championships. So Australia, New Zealand, that part of the world. We actually just had the Asia region go last weekend. We had a couple of athletes over there.
Awesome.
And so the Torian's a big one for us, obviously, Australian crew. So we've got about 50 or so athletes going up to compete there. And we've got our coaching team, me and the 3 other coaches and a couple of support staff up there. So
50 athletes is
3 days. Yeah,
it's a massive number of athletes.
Yeah.
How does that spread across? I don't expect you to rattle off every single one, but how does that spread across? The pro, the elite,
So there's the elite division of the competition, which is the pathway to the CrossFit Games, which is the World Championships. 3 men, 3 women, individual athletes will go to the games, and they'll also take 3 teams. The teams of 4, 2 men, 2 women. In the elite teams, we have 7 teams that we're working with. 7 teams of 4 out of
How many teams qualify?
There's 30 teams.
30 teams.
Yeah.
And Starr Strength 7 of those 30.
Yeah, 7 of
That's
those.
huge.
7 of those 30. 6 out of the 30 are pretty much complete. 4 of the team members pretty much are Starr Strength.
Yeah, that's huge.
Clients, and then there's one team that we work quite closely with that has one of our athletes, and we also have some individual competitors. 3 individual competitors out there. Lukey McMahon, who's a bit of a veteran in the male
He's a veteran at 22.
division.
How old is he now?
I think he's 28 now.
He's forever young.
So, he's been doing it about 10 years at that level consistently. I think there's
Insane.
1 year he missed, or not many years that he's missed at that level. So it's exciting to see him back there again. And then on the girls' side, we've got Caitlin Porter and Beck Glenister. Caitlin's from Sydney and Beck's from Queensland. And then we also have in the pro division we're working with about 5 teams there, and we've got 2 masters teams heading to Torian. There's also 1 teenage athlete individual and an adaptive athlete as well. So
that's huge. That's a massive weekend.
Yeah, it's good fun.
I don't want to brush over that because that's just incredible that you've got that many people representing Starr Strength up there. How do you go? You mentioned you got 2 other coaches up there. How do you go in Starr Strength now with that's just the people competing this weekend? I can only imagine how many people you're coaching on the, when we start to take into consideration masters athletes that just did quarters and semi-finals. And, I was with you for one of the weekends, and that was enough for me. That was I can't imagine how you deal with all of these guys. So what's your coaching structure? Who are your coaches? How do you deal with this sort of volume of people? Yeah,
so we've got really fortunate to have like a really, I'm really proud of our team of coaches and our team in general. So basically, our team is we've got myself and 3 other coaches who work like one-on-one with these athletes. Mm-hmm. We also program for about 30 affiliates as well. So there's about 30 gyms that follow Starr Strength programming for their classes.
Okay.
So our team, Jody Gardner, he's the one that's been with me the longest out of those 3 coaches. He takes care of the bulk of the affiliate programming.
Okay.
And helps me with a lot of the programming on the athlete program as well. So Jody's originally from New Zealand, had an affiliate over there, and then came over here over 5 years ago now. He was on a team for Starr Strength in 2020 that actually qualified for the games. But unfortunately we didn't get to go because of COVID. So brutal. Yeah, that was the team with Alethea Boone and Reese Machel and Chrissy Hollard. So Jody's awesome. Obviously really knows his stuff and very experienced. We've also got Luke Fulham, aka Bunnings. Bunnings has been coaching CrossFit for like 12 years. He's Sydney based. He's also like super knowledgeable and experienced in weightlifting as well.
Also a very good weightlifter himself.
And a great weightlifter himself. holds a bunch of records and stuff. So he's awesome. He's been with us for a few years. He started doing the camps a few years ago now, and he's been working with athletes for it's been over a year now. So Luke's awesome. And then we've got Steve Norman, who's more of our latest recruit, but he's been here. He's been with us for about 6 months or so. Steve recently moved down to Melbourne because he got a job as a strength and conditioning coach for, I believe it's the Essendon Women's like VFL team, professional. So
yeah.
That meant that he wasn't able to do as much for us anymore, but he still looks after a book of clients and contributes to our programming, and he'll be at Torian coaching and stuff. So he's still definitely one of our coaches.
All of you going up
We'll all be there at Torian helping the guys out. So
that's awesome, man.
And of course we'll have Paige, my partner, is there. She's does
the glue.
It keeps us together. Like all the non-coaching stuff. Like Paige does an awesome job, and we definitely wouldn't be able to function without her input. So
well, man, I take my hat off to you, and I think anyone else out there listening that has ever coached athletes to think to go up there with that amount of representation, it's going to be. I can't imagine what the last 6 months of your life has looked like just in that. But not only have you been coaching these 30 affiliates, all the competitive athletes, semi-finals and stuff like that. You obviously father. September, Indy was born, 8-month-old baby at the moment, and you've recently just bought an affiliate. You're back to owning an affiliate as well. So, I just don't understand the last 12 months, how much has been on your plate.
We see each other a fair bit, and it's been a big 12 months, but yeah, it's all really positive stuff and all stuff that we've chosen to go all in on and everything. So it's like just loving life, and it's been big sort of challenging period, but also a big period of growth, and really grateful for like a lot of the people we've got in our life at the moment. At all you guys at the gym, and like all the Starr Strength crew and just, all our family and friends and stuff.
It's been huge, man, and I can't
time.
imagine anything slowing down. Like, I can only see it getting bigger and bigger and busier. Mate, we'll wrap it up there. I suppose from me, good luck up at Torian. Good luck to everyone from Starr Strength as well.
Thank you.
It's a massive showing. We're talking about before not being attached to the outcome, and like the ability to get that many people to the biggest competition in Oceania is massive. So congratulations on being such a successful coach, affiliate owner, and father. You're absolutely killing it. If anyone wants to reach out, if they're looking for potentially, to get involved with Starr Strength or on the Northern Beaches and want to train, what's the best way they get in touch with you?
Oh, look, just look up, if you look up Starr Strength and Performance, you'll probably find us. And we're on Instagram and got a website and stuff. So, yep.
There you go. Google search. All right, Starry, thank you very much for coming on. Is there anything you want to sign off with?
Thanks, Sean. No, thanks very much, guys, if you made it this far.
Thanks, mate.